February 14, 1943, 1:14 p.m., 20,000 feet above Guadalcanal. First Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh rolls his F-4U Corsair hard left, desperately trying to follow a Japanese Zero. The enemy fighter turns inside him again. Walsh pulls harder. His vision tunnels. Blood drains from his brain, 4Gs, 5Gs, 6, yet the Zero is still turning tighter. Walsh's wingman, Second Lieutenant Howard Finn, screams through the radio, break right, he's on you!" But Walsh can't brake. If he does, the Zero will kill him. The statistics from early 1943 were devastating. In the first 30 days of Corsair combat operations, Marine pilots claimed 47 aerial victories. Impressive numbers, but they were consistently losing dogfights against Zeros at altitudes below 10,000 feet. The problem wasn't pilot skill, it was physics. The F-4U Corsair, America's newest fighter, packed 2,000 horsepower. It was 40 miles per hour faster than any Zero and could outdive anything the Japanese flew, but it could not outturn them. VMF 124, the first squadron to fly Corsairs in combat, reported a troubling pattern. At low speeds, during the critical turning fights, the Corsair's massive 13-foot 4-inch propeller became a liability. The engine's enormous torque forced pilots to fight their own aircraft just to keep their wings level. In the first 6 weeks of combat, VMF 124 lost 8 Corsairs, not to superior Japanese pilots, but to the Corsair's own handling characteristics. Major William Geese, the squadron commander, wrote that the aircraft lacked low-speed authority. Pilots could not maintain coordinated flight during maximum G turns. He desperately requested a solution. VAT engineers responded, "The propeller governor is calibrated to factory specifications. Any field modifications would violate certification. Request denied." What those engineers didn't know was that 7,000 miles from Connecticut, on a muddy airstrip in the Solomon Islands, a 23-year-old mechanic with a high school education was about to ignore every regulation in the manual. His name was Technical Sergeant James Jimmy Nagel from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a former garage mechanic with 0 engineering degrees, 0 aeronautical training. In 72 hours, his forbidden modification would turn the Corsair from a troubled fighter into the most lethal aircraft in the Pacific. The Japanese would eventually call it Shinofukia, the death whistle. The problem had been killing Allied pilots since 1942. Japan's Mitsubishi A6M Zero dominated Pacific skies through superior maneuverability. The physics were brutally simple. The Zero weighed 5,300 pounds. The Corsair weighed 2,100 pounds. Newton's laws don't negotiate, experts agreed. You cannot make a 12,000-pound fighter turn like a 5,000-pound fighter. It's mathematically impossible. Despite official prohibition memos against field adjustments, the stakes couldn't be higher. If the Corsair couldn't fight Zeros in turning combat, America's multi-billion-dollar bet on the Pacific Air War was compromised. Japanese commanders recognized the flaw and changed tactics. They would force Corsairs into slow-speed turning fights where Zeros still dominated. Frank Baldwin, a first lieutenant with VMF 124, wrote home on March 10, 1943, "The Corsair is a beast, but it fights you in the turn. The rudder stiffens, the nose drops. You're wrestling physics while a Zero walks around inside your turn and puts bullets in your tail." That letter reached Baldwin's family 3 weeks after his death. Jimmy Nagel wasn't an engineer. He was a mechanic who actually listened to pilots. He asked questions. On February 19, 1943, Lieutenant Howard Finn, furious after a mission, vented, "The damn thing won't bite. The prop's fighting me like I'm pulling the whole goddamn engine around against its will." Most mechanics would have said, "That's torque, nothing we can do." Jimmy asked, "What if we could?" He realized the propeller governor, the device that adjusted blade pitch to maintain optimal engine RPM, compromised at every setting to work adequately at all of them. But combat pilots didn't need adequate. They needed perfect in the turn. The manual for the Hamilton Standard propeller was clear. Adjustment requires certification. Unauthorized modification may result in catastrophic blade failure. Don't touch it. Jimmy thought about the lost men, closed the manual, and at 300 hours on February 20th, 1943, he began what the manual called impossible. Using a crescent wrench, a micrometer, and his Pittsburgh garage mechanic stubbornness, Jimmy removed a propeller governor. He located the fine pitch stop, a small brass screw. This stop prevented the blades from going too flat, and the manual warned that a finer pitch would cause overspeed and destroy the engine. Jimmy thought, what if we accepted that risk? He turned the screw 1/4 turn. He changed the fine pitch from the standard 23.5 degrees to 21.8 degrees, a change of just 1.7 degrees, roughly 1/16 of an inch at the blade tip. The manual would call it catastrophic. Jimmy called it necessary. On February 21st, Jimmy installed the modified governor on Lieutenant Finn's Corsair, telling no one. After a test flight, Finn climbed out of the cockpit. "What did you do?" "The plane, it's different. Lighter in the turn. Like the nose wants to come around instead of fighting me." When Jimmy started to explain the technical change, Finn cut him off. "I don't care about the technical. Can you do it to the whole squadron?" 2 days later, Major Geese discovered the modifications. He confronted the sergeant, asking on whose goddamn authority he modified government aircraft. "Mine, sir," Jimmy replied quietly. Geese ordered a comparative test the next morning. 1 standard Corsair, 1 modified. They would measure which aircraft completed more rotations in 60 seconds. The modified aircraft, flown by Lieutenant Finn, flew circles around the standard one. "I'm at maximum performance and he's flying circles around me," Lieutenant Walsh radioed. Major Geese looked at his engineering officer. "Ground the standard configuration aircraft. Sergeant Nagel, you have 24 hours to modify every propeller in this squadron." The numbers were undeniable. The modified Corsair's minimum sustained turn radius was 710 feet compared to the standard 890 feet, a 180-foot improvement. Pilots could sustain the turns without fighting their own aircraft. The Navy Bureau of Aeronautics was hostile, demanding the aircraft be grounded, but Major Geese refused. The deciding voice came from Lieutenant Commander John Blackburn, a Navy test pilot, who flew to Guadalcanal to evaluate it. His report, "Sergeant Nagel's modification represents empirical field engineering of the highest order. Recommend immediate fleet-wide adoption." On February 28, 1943, Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh flew a modified Corsair. In a sustained turning engagement, he did what had been impossible. He stayed with the zero, turn for turn. The modified prop bit hard, and Walsh's nose tracked inside the zero's path. He fired. Kill. He scored 2 turning kills in 1 mission. Walsh landed, climbed out, and walked up to Jimmy Nagel. He extended his hand. Quietly, he said, "You saved my life today." The statistics from the following months told the story. VMF 124, flying modified Corsairs, achieved a 22.1 kill ratio. A non-modified squadron flew at 6.1. Japanese intelligence reports quickly noted that their tactical advantage in turning engagements had diminished. Jimmy Nagel returned to Pittsburgh, reopened his father's garage, and lived quietly. When asked about the modification, his response was always the same. "I just did my job." He was the Pittsburgh garage mechanic who knew that saving lives mattered more than following rules. The engineers said it was impossible. The regulations said it was illegal. The pilots said it saved their lives.